I think we should be very careful about artificial intelligence. If I were to guess at what our biggest existential threat is, it's probably that. So we need to be very careful with artificial intelligence. I'm increasingly inclined to think that there should be some regulatory oversight maybe at the national and international level, just to make sure that we don't do something very foolish. I mean, with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. You know all those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, he's sure he can control the demon. Didn't work out. HAL 9000 would be easy. It's way more complex than, I mean, it would put HAL 9000 to shame. Yeah. I was like a puppy dog. Communications is certainly very important. We're going to need terabit level communication between Earth and Mars, which necessarily means that you want to have a tight beam, like a laser communication system or something like that. And relays, sort of satellites that relay it, because sometimes Mars is on the other side of the sun, so you've got to bounce the photons around the sun, not through them. So I think communications are definitely going to be important. Also think that on Earth there's a lot of potential for space-based communications. I think that there's a huge amount of room to grow for having satellite communication systems that provide high bandwidth global coverage. And we'll need the same for Mars. I mean, I think it would be awesome if there was a space elevator. I wouldn't hold my breath. I mean, I don't think it's realistic, but I'd like to be proven wrong. I always think of like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory when I hear the space elevator, but because people sort of manage, like an elevator, you press up and you just like, now you're in space. This is extremely complicated. I don't think it's really realistic to have a space elevator. And I mean, let me put it this way, like, at the point at which we have like a bridge from LA to Tokyo, which I think is a much easier problem, then we, how about across the Atlantic, like some sort of 2,000 mile long bridge, 3,000 mile long bridge, something like that would be, made of like carbon nanotubes. Like I don't think we've got a carbon nanotube footbridge so far. Let alone some enormous 60,000 mile long space elevator. Anyway, so I think it's not the thing that I think makes sense right now, but hey, if somebody can prove me wrong, and that'd be great. Well, we've been able to soft land boost the rocket booster in the ocean twice so far. Unfortunately, sort of sat there for several seconds, then tipped over and exploded. And unfortunately, it's as tall as a 14-story building. So, when a 14-story building falls over, it's quite a belly flop. So what we need to do is to be able to either land on a floating platform or ideally boost back to the launch site and land back at the launch site. But before we boost back to the launch site and try to land there, we need to show that we can land with precision over and over again. Otherwise something bad could happen. But if it doesn't boost back to where we intended. So for the upcoming launch, I think we've got a chance of landing on a floating landing platform. We actually have a huge platform that's being constructed at a shipyard in Louisiana right now, which is, it's huge-ish. I mean, it's about 300 feet long by 170 feet wide. That looks very tiny from space. And the leg span of the rocket is 60 feet. So, you've got, and this is going to be positioning itself up in the ocean with, with engines that'll keep it, or try to keep it in a particular position. But it's tricky. You've got these big rollers and GPS errors. So, it's not anchored because it's like out in the bloody Atlantic. So, that's we're going to try to land on that on the next flight, And if we land on that, then I think we'll be able to refly that booster. But it's probably maybe not more than a 50% chance or less of landing it on the platform for the first time. But there's a lot of launches that will occur over the next year. So there's at least a dozen launches that will occur over the next 12 months. And I think it's quite likely, probably 80–90% likely, that one of those flights will be able to land and refly. So I think we're quite close. The long-term ambition of SpaceX is to develop technologies necessary to establish a self-sustaining city on Mars, or civilization on Mars. And wings and a runway don't really work if you're going somewhere other than Earth. The moon doesn't have an atmosphere, so wings and wheels are, there's no runways and there's no atmosphere. Not a good choice for the moon. And then on Mars, there are also no runways, and the atmosphere is very thin. And so unless you try to land something at supersonic velocity, it's just not a good choice for Mars either. So you really have to get good at propulsive landing if you want to go someplace other than Earth, which is why you have rockets, because obviously aircraft work quite well on Earth. But even for Earth recovery, when you really look at it, even if other planets had atmospheres, the penalty for propulsive landing is quite low. Like you can just do an easy calculation of what's the terminal velocity, and then how long do you have to fire the engine at what G level to get to zero velocity. And then if you do some interesting things, like if you look at our landing gear, they're essentially like giant body flaps. So the drag, when we deploy the landing gear, the drag massively increases. And so we have dual use of the landing gear as giant body flaps and as landing gear. And it actually cuts the terminal velocity in half. And therefore the fuel, the propellant that we need to stop the vehicle in half. And actually it's quite an efficient method of landing precisely. You can use less mass if you want to do parachutes or water landing, but then reusability is negatively affected. The next generation vehicles after the Falcon architecture will be designed for full reusability. I don't expect the Falcon line to have a reusable upper stage, just because with a kerosene-based system, the specific impulse isn't really high enough to do that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the missions we do for commercial satellite deployment are geostationary missions. So we're really going very far out. These are high delta velocity missions. So to try to get something back from that is really difficult. But with the next generation of vehicles, which is going to be a subcooled methane oxygen system, where the propellants are cooled to close to their freezing temperature to increase the density, we can definitely do a full reusability. And that system is intended to be a fully reusable Mars transportation system. So not merely to low Earth orbit, but all the way to Mars and back.
What are we talking?
Full reusability.
3 years?
I'm an optimistic person, but
always.
I think we could start to see some test flights in the 5 or 6 year time frame. But we're talking about a much bigger vehicle.
Much bigger vehicle together.
Yeah, maybe. And we're also going to be upgrading to sort of a new generation, a harder engine cycle, which is a full flow staged combustion. So what we have right now is an open cycle engine. So right now I'd say like engines are our weakest point at SpaceX, but they will become as strong as the structures and avionics in the next generation. Okay. Like right now, our weakest point is engines with respect to specific impulse, but not with respect to thruster weight. We actually have the highest thruster weight of any engine, I think maybe ever. But our specific impulse, the efficiency of the engine is about 10% worse than a staged combustion engine using the same propellant.